Well, thank you so much for joining. It's amazing to have you here.
Yeah, happy to help.
Just a quick recap, the podcast is to help expert witnesses know what attorneys are thinking. I help the experts with their web design and their SEO. And a lot of the questions they had was like, how do attorneys find me? What keywords are they searching for? And that sort of thing. Sometimes the experts they don't want to mention too many things because then it can be brought up against them in the position. But something I was wondering about is, does naming big companies, can that be used against them even though it is like an actual fact that they, let's say there was a litigation between Valvoline and a customer went to Valvoline and they got bad service. The customer then sued Valvoline and an expert was brought to analyze that situation. Would it be better to not mention such a big name company, or do you think that doesn't really matter?
I don't think that's a huge deal when looking at whether or not an attorney is going to retain an expert. We have plenty of experts who represent both plaintiffs and defendants in civil matters. They generally don't say who the defendant is that they represent. They'll usually be somewhat vague and indicate that they've represented corporate defendants or they've represented or been retained by major healthcare systems or major insurance companies. But honestly, from the eyes of a plaintiff's attorney, if you have an expert that frequently represents both sides of the V, so to speak, then that to me increases the credibility of that expert because you generally tend to think that they're going to provide an opinion that is based on the facts as they see it through the lens of their expertise, and they're going to provide you a more valid opinion. The short answer is that isn't something that would deter me from hiring an expert if I found out that they had previously represented a larger company.
And then, would you have an idea if maybe the opposition might bring that up, or
The opposition brings up a lot of things with experts when it comes to trying to discredit their testimony. So, simply bringing up that they've been retained by a major corporation in the past isn't the be all end all of the conversation. If it's discovered that it's a defendant who they routinely work with, then that could potentially present a problem for the expert. We like to request trial testimony or a trial list of experts who are disclosed to try to get an idea as to how often they're named as an expert in federal cases or in state cases as attorneys. One of the questions is, what do you look at when trying to find an expert? There's a lot of word of mouth that attorneys rely upon and reputation that of experts that attorneys rely upon other attorneys to kind of get their feedback on how an expert performs or how frequently they encounter an expert, who that expert has worked with in the past and the frequency with which they work with a particular entity or defendant. So if you do have an expert that routinely provides testimony for a corporate defendant like Valvoline in your hypothetical, then someone on my side would absolutely seek to use that against them as an attack on their credibility because it seems like they are frequently retained for a particular opinion that, in my experience, when you encounter an expert who's routinely obtained by a particular defendant, their opinion is usually the same every time, and that certainly can be used to attack their credibility.
yeah, that's a good point you brought up of experts working too much with a specific entity or even a specific attorney as well. For example, I had asked someone in the previous episode if, let's say, an expert worked with someone a few years ago and now there's a case that they work with that same attorney again, or maybe they're even on the opposite side of things now, that wouldn't be such an issue. But how many times does an expert have to work with the same attorney or the same entity for it to be like a red flag, like, oh, something funky is going on here?
In my line of work, when we're filing cases, we do a lot of auto crash cases, for instance. So we handle a lot of medical expert testimony. And when you begin to see an expert used on 25% of the cases that you're filing on, and they're routinely used to provide a defense-based opinion, that's a big red flag. That's someone that I would probably never use as one of my experts, just because they've kind of shown that they're readily available for the defense. And what we've also discovered is that, we deal with insurance companies a lot, and we've discovered that they sort of have an approved expert list internally that they rely upon when deciding which experts they're going to use. So that's all information that eventually we're going to come into possession of. And when you see that, you kind of understand and begin to expect what that expert is going to testify to. And, we've developed plenty of ways to really attack and discredit experts in that particular instance. So, if you see an expert who is used by a defendant more than a handful of times over a several year period, that's kind of an indicator, at least to me, that you understand what their opinion is going to be before they even provide you with their report.
Sometimes the experts tell me, oh, I don't need to do any marketing because I already work with a handful of lawyers. But if anything, that's hurting them because now there's this history of them working with the same people throughout the years.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When you work with the same people over and over again, you may have a steady flow of business, but you're absolutely right. You're limiting the network of individuals that you're making yourself available to, and you're potentially pigeonholing yourself as an expert who's only going to be used by those particular law firms or companies. And then what happens is, as you're used more and more, your opinions become less credible. You run the risk of and listen, the court system sees this too. The judges who oversee lots of these types of cases, if they get to know who you are and who you routinely represent, then that's going to be reflected in the value that they place in your opinion as well. I've seen opinions written that are outwardly criticizing experts for their opinions and finding them not credible just because of the sheer volume of opinions that they provide and the fact that it's consistently for the same core group of defense counsel or defendant companies. And then what happens is the companies in defense counsel realize that your opinion isn't worth what it used to be, and let's say that they stop using you. And at that point, you're not getting the steady flow of business that you used to because you've been overused and you really haven't worked on expanding your network. So then you're kind of left with an inability to generate new business because you haven't taken the time to try to expand because you were relying on that smaller group of individuals.
That's a great, like, really valuable insight. So I know a lot of experts, they put a big emphasis on their resumes, on their CVs. Like, I remember back when I was looking for a job, you try to make your resume as short as possible, right? 1 or 2 pages the most. But for the experts, I see they really put almost their whole life history, of course, regarding their expert work, but they make this resume pages and pages long, like 10 pages long. Let's say you're looking to work with an expert that is not in your network, so you're looking for a new one and you're on an expert's website. Would you rather see like maybe a more summarized CV, or do you want to have all the information available right away?
For me in particular, I've seen those resumes or those CVs where they've got their fellowship training, their residence training, their research, all of the articles that they've published, and I think that's probably good for purposes of clearing the necessary hurdles to get someone admitted as an expert to the extent that there's a challenge on their admissibility as an expert. But me as an attorney, what what I'm more focused on is kind of what we were previously discussing. Who do you routinely testify for? What type of testimony experience or live testimony experience, deposition experience do you have? I need to know that not only are you able to provide me with the opinion that I need, but also how are you able to articulate that opinion in a manner that helps me and my client with our case and the story that we're trying to tell. So, training is good. Obviously, any particular types of certifications that you might have are certainly important because if you have a more nuanced case and you need a particular expert that works in maybe a niche field, then you want to make sure that they have the qualifications to provide you with the opinion that you want. Something else that is I think would be beneficial is you see a lot of experts who are very well qualified, but sometimes maybe they're not the best at presenting their opinion. So having some sort of, you know, video or something along those lines where an attorney, if you're marketing through your website, for instance, having some sort of highlight video or just basic video introducing yourself so I can see you, listen to you, and get an idea for how I think a jury might respond to you would also be something that's beneficial.
And going back to where you said when looking in the resume, you want to see something in regards to who they routinely testify for. Do you mean that you want to see if they testify most for plaintiff or defendant?
I don't know that I necessarily need to see that on their CV, but more along the lines of, notable cases where they have testified and maybe a brief synopsis of the opinion that they provided. And that's going to allow me to see the particular type of opinion that they rendered and also who they rendered that opinion for and maybe even what the outcome of that particular case was.
So not whether they help win the case or not, but just what happened in the case.
Well, that would tell me, that would definitely be an indicator as to whether or not their opinion was a driver in the result of that case. So certainly, if they help, there are a lot of things obviously that go into whether a particular side wins a case or not, and it's unfair to whittle it down to just the experts, but just knowing the overall result of that case, but also just trying to get an understanding as to the facts of that case and really what the focus of their particular opinion was in that case. That's going to let me know whether maybe the facts of that case and their opinion aligns with what I need an expert for in my particular case.
It seems like a big part of the experts, the opposition always tries to discredit them with everything they can. And something I've been noticing is that when they bring up the expert's marketing material, it seems it's kind of like as a Hail Mary from the opposite side to try and discredit this expert because they couldn't find anything in the reports or testimony to actually make him look bad. So now they're trying to bring just anything they can to make him look bad. Is that like a general idea when that happens?
I think that I've encountered a lot of experts who all have websites, and my response to that would be that there's a lot of attorneys out there who need experts but don't know where to begin looking for experts, and that's what that's why the expert does what they do, is to help attorneys, come up with someone who can help support their particular position in a case that requires their expertise to provide that opinion. The example that I use is most people who have a leak in their house, don't know a plumber offhand. So they're going to go online and try to find a plumber to help fix the leak in their house. Well, the same analogy could be used for attorneys. Most attorneys who have a case that maybe they're handling this particular type of case for the first time, they don't know where to begin. So they're going to go online to try to find an expert who they feel best fits their need for their particular case.
So they should be doing marketing for their practice, for their business, so attorneys can find them. You're not always encountering the very same cases to where you use the same people that you've used before. Sometimes you have to hire outside your network as well.
Yes, of course. It's a bit more straightforward when you're dealing with medical doctors, right? Because if you have someone who's injured, you're just going to speak to the treating doctor and get their opinion on it. But when you have a more complex case with significant damages or potential liability hurdles, our duty to our clients is to make sure that we're covering every potential aspect of their case. And, part of our duty is making sure that we find them the best expert possible that's going to help us present their case ultimately to a jury and help a jury understand all of the different aspects of their case. And so by having websites, by marketing, attorneys were going to go and look and investigate and do our part to make sure that we have left no stone unturned when it comes to finding the best experts possible to help our clients present their case. And so a website that an expert would have would definitely be the starting place for us in terms of seeing whether or not they're the best fit.
Do you, as an attorney, and even maybe as a consumer in general, when you're looking to work with a company that you had to look them online because it's outside your network, do you weigh in the fact that they have a more professional online presence as opposed to something that looks older, as opposed to something that just might look older without putting any words in your mouth?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking, and as attorneys looking for it's, we are kind of consumers in that regard. We're trying to find someone that's going to help us, and I definitely think that as a consumer, you typically are drawn more towards the companies or experts that are going to have a more well put together website. Somebody who has an older web page that doesn't flow very well, or you have some of the links that don't even work, or it just generally looks a little older. It's just kind of a turnoff for a younger attorney like myself. We want to make sure that the expert that we hire are well versed in the appropriate forms of technology, that we feel comfortable that they're going to be responsive to all of our inquiries in a timely fashion. And I think that when you encounter an older appearing website, there's certainly some concerns that, uh, you know, given what juries expect to be presented with, and really what we're going to need, you do kind of have a judging the book moment where you're a little hesitant to hire someone who maybe doesn't have as advanced a website as a competitor.
Patrick, thank you so much. Those were all the questions I had for today. For this last part, you are allowed to talk about yourself, your law firm, how you help people, and if there's anyone listening, who your ideal client is, so that if they're listening, they can reach out to you as well.
Sure. My name is Patrick Hinrichs. I'm a partner at the Bruning Law Firm in St. Louis, Missouri. We focus primarily on personal injury matters and stemming from automobile crashes, truck crashes, motorcycle crashes, product liability issues, and anybody that's ever been impacted by the negligence of a driver or a truck driver or anyone who generally isn't operating with the highest degree of care. We're interested in talking to and helping out and providing the best legal service possible.
Perfect. Again, thank you so much, Patrick.